What's up everybody, Super X Fan here for another car review. This is of course the 2012 Dodge Challenger V6. Many thanks to Harrison Auto Sales for hooking me up with this car to review for you guys today. So, the first thing that you think of when you see this is it's intimidating, it's mean, it's hulking, it's a brute. And I mean, there's just no mistaking this retro front end. I mean, of all the three muscle cars that have been reborn, this is the one that really reminds you of the original. And they just did an excellent job on the front end of this. I mean, but you see this coming down the road, it always looks mean, you know, because the hood extends out over the headlights there and really kind of gives this car a hunched over, kind of menacing look to it. It just looks amazing, like nothing else on the road. And it's big too, you can see it. I mean, it's very long, it's very wide, it's pretty low. It's got a very mean stance to it. And the back end on these cars is great too, with those long Challenger taillights. Again, just very unique. You don't see anything like that on the roads really these days. I love the way these look. So the big question here is, yes, this is the V6 model, the one that's the cheapest. So, is this V6 going to be as good to drive as a V8? Well, probably not, but I still want to give you guys my impressions on, you know, what it's like with a V6. Is this livable? You know, if you want better gas mileage, you don't care about going extremely fast in a straight line, and you just want the cool looks. All right, so for the interior of this car, the first thing you notice before you even sit down in here is how thick these doors are. I mean, I think it's probably the thickest door on any car made in the year 2012. I mean, they're, I'd say, about as thick as an armored truck's doors. It's that ridiculously thick. It's really cool though, because it gives it a very solid feel and very sturdy feeling. But anyway, now that we're inside here, it's very spacious. It's not overly big, it just feels nice in here actually. I'm quite surprised at how plush this feels in here. So these seats, for one, are nice leather and they're pretty soft. They have some pretty good support. I mean, they have side bolsters, they're not big or anything, but I mean, they get the job done. Again, for a muscle car of this type, they're decent. You know, these aren't racing seats, but they're okay. I can't really complain about them too much. Steering wheel is a fairly big wheel, and there's a decent 9 and 3 position, but there's these like little paddles that kind of get in the way, and there's some buttons behind the wheel, so it kind of prevents you from getting a really nice 9 and 3 grip, but it's not as bad as the Camaro, that's for sure. Yeah, it's not bad, but these paddles though, they're only like go halfway down the wheel. They're these like mini paddles. They're made out of metal and they feel nice, but it's just kind of strange to only have half a paddle here. So recently they redid these interiors on these Challengers and it looks a little bit nicer in here. You have gauges with white faces and some pretty cool font. It's almost cartoon-esque. It's interesting. And then you come over to the center console here and you have your basic Chrysler radio. Nothing really spectacular. It has satellite radio and you know, Bluetooth, things like that, but really not very nice to look at. But these temperature controls, they feel very luxurious and like very high quality. They really improve the interiors on these a lot. It's a much better quality than the Camaro that I reviewed, that's for sure. Materials though, as far as everything else goes, you have some nice thick leather here for your elbow, which is really great. This is nice and soft up here too. And then this gets hard. This is pretty hard plastic here. Hard plastic up here on the dash. It's nice to have this nice leather armrest here. But, you know, a lot of this plastic is pretty hard stuff. Wish they kind of made things a little bit nicer. But, you know, for the price point this car is at, it's certainly not terrible. And so as far as storage compartments go in this, muscle car obviously, so it's not a priority. You have little pockets in the doors here, tiny little cubby for something like change. Next to the gear shifter here, you have your 2 cup holders, another slot here to put a cell phone or something. And then the center console is pretty deep actually though. I mean, you can fit a good amount of stuff in here. That's about the extent of the storage space though in the interior here. Back seats in this car is about average for a muscle car, not big. Bigger than my BRZ, but not big. You know, you really wouldn't want to put people back there all the time. And yeah, and as far as the trunk goes, it's a nice big trunk. Good for at least 2 bodies. It's really nice in here though. I'm really impressed. I like this interior a lot. It's a great place to be. One interesting thing though is the seat won't go any lower, and when you're in the interior, I feel like I'm sitting low in the interior but high in the car, if that makes any sense. So like my chin is coming up to like where the gauge is in. So I mean, I'm sitting low and I have a lot of stuff around me, but I still feel like I'm sitting up high in a big car. So that's a little odd, but I mean, it's just something you get used to. I mean, muscle cars, you normally feel like you're sitting up a little bit higher. This one, you definitely feel that way for sure. All right, so let's take it for a drive and see how it does. This car has push button start and keyless ignition, so you just hit the start button and away you go. All right, so driving through a nice serene park in this big, mean muscle car. And on these bumps on this road, it doesn't really soak them up very well. It's very smooth ride with minor imperfections, but if there's like larger things that really get it upset, you feel it. But it's not harsh or anything. I would just say, you know, it's a little more pronounced than I would like. But one thing is, it's pretty quiet in here. Like even with the windows down, you know, cruising at 20 miles an hour, it still is very quiet and comfortable in here and relaxed. It's just funny though, because this car looks so mean, I almost feel suspicious driving it. Like I'm driving past people that are looking at me, and I like want to tell them, no, I'm not a drug dealer. No, like I'm not trying to murder anyone. I'm just driving around. It's kind of funny because this car does give off a mean vibe, and people look at you when you're driving it, and it's kind of like makes them a little uneasy. It's kind of funny. So anyway, let's take it on this back road here and see how it does. Okay, so if you get this motor to wake up, it'll really go pretty well for a V6. Whenever I was driving around town earlier, this felt slow. Like in traffic, it felt like it was slow. It doesn't really have a whole lot of low-end torque, and it feels slow whenever you're driving around town. But whenever you stomp on it and you finally let it really rev itself out, it pulls hard. And I mean, I went 0 to 50 and really quick. I mean, for what this car is, this is a 4,000-pound car with a 300 horsepower V6 engine and about 268 foot-pounds of torque. So that's really not a whole lot to work with. So you would think that this thing would feel really slow. But if you really put your foot into it, I mean, it'll get up and get out of the way. And one thing that also shocked me is I'm on this back road here, and I'm going around corners in this car, and it takes them really well. I mean, you know, you aren't going to be pushing it, but just for cruising around, like I'm coming up to this really tight corner that I always drive on. And so we're coming up at an average speed, going around. I mean, yes, it does roll, but it's very planted and controlled in the way that it rolls, which is, might sound like some odd praise, but it actually feels good going around corners. The Camaro just felt like it did not want to go around those corners. Mustang just did not like corners whatsoever, that old Mustang at least that I was reviewing. But this one feels pretty nice around that corner. And again, this motor, you gotta rev it out for sure. You get it over $4,000 and it really kind of kicks in. It's interesting. One thing I'll touch on briefly here though, because I already played with it a little bit, is this manual mode, which is about as bad as the Subaru Legacy that I tested recently. So I clicked, and there's the downshift. And I'm just cruising along, and I want to upshift and click. There's the shift. So it's kind of funny. Very delayed. Again, this is just a basic 5-speed automatic though. Nothing sporty. It's kind of annoying. And one other thing that's really a quirky thing about this car that I've noticed is once you put it in that manual mode, there's no way to get it out of there unless you put the car in park. It's stuck in manual mode. Like, I tried playing around with this drive selector, and it forces you to just manually shift. And so once you put it in that manual mode, you better be prepared to drive in manual mode for the duration of your trip. Maybe I just have to figure out how to put it back in drive, but it feels like whenever you put it in that manual mode, you're stuck in that manual mode until you put the car out of gear. So that's interesting. One other thing I can mention while I'm just parked here, though, is it does feel really big going down the road, but it's really not that big of a car. So when you're looking in your mirrors, you're like, wow, I'm like in my lane perfectly, but you're like nervous the whole time looking forward because it just looks so wide. But it really does stay in its lane okay. You just kind of have to trust that it's not as big as it seems, and it's okay. But that's, again, a typical muscle car trait. It feels big. But yeah, I'll drive this car for a while longer here, and I'll give you a better idea of what it's like over the long term. All right, so I've been driving this car for a while now, and I gotta say, I like this a lot more than the Camaro. One thing this does share with the Camaro, though, is a bad blind spot because of the enormous C-pillars. This car has them. This car has big C-pillars. It's actually not quite as bad as the Camaro's blind spot, but it's still like really tricky backing out of parking spaces. So, you know, other than that, though, that's really my only complaint. This car is really comfortable. And to me, if I'm buying a muscle car, I could spend that same $25,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, whatever, on a really sharp sports car if that's what I wanted. Obviously, someone that buys one of these cars is not looking for a backroads carver, because if you could afford this, you can afford a used Lotus Elise or a BRZ or a whole wide variety of other cars that are better in taking corners. People buy this car to go comfortably in a straight line. So in that regard, this car is amazing. It's super nice. I loved it. The thing is that with the Camaro I drove, I guess you could say it was comfortable, but I never felt at home in it. Whereas this car, I feel really comfortable and at home in this car. I've been driving this car for a few hours and I feel like I could just live with it the rest of my life. It's just, it kind of just fits you like a nicely, you know, broken in glove or something. It really is a nice feeling car to drive. It's a very comfortable ride. You have a very commanding view of the road, pretty good visibility aside from those C-pillars, and it's just a great car to just cruise and just relax, and really a nice car for that purpose, you know, just driving around. It's faster than I thought it was going to be. Much faster than I thought it was going to be, actually. So I don't really have much complaints about the power. I mean, obviously, yes, it'd be way better with an awesome V8 soundtrack and the V8 torque. Around town, I kind of miss not having as much torque as you get in a V8. But aside from that, I mean, this motor is plenty. This is a pretty good option for people that still want to get somewhat decent gas mileage. You know, this is still a powerful car. It looks amazing. It looks cool. You still get the awesome muscle car feeling in this car, and you know, you don't have to worry about paying the more expensive insurance for a V8 and the higher gas prices. I still like the Mustang better, so my muscle car ranking goes Mustang, Challenger, Camaro. I definitely like this a lot better than the Camaro, and yeah, it's a great car. If you buy this car, you're buying it because you want to cruise. If you want to cruise, this is a really nice cruiser. So yeah, really impressed with this car. You know, the transmission is a little frustrating at times. The stereo is actually better than I thought. For being the bass stereo system, it actually has a pretty nice sound to it. It has a good little bit of bass in it and everything. I mean, it's not much to look at, but it is definitely a nice sound system, and I don't really have any complaints other than that C-pillar. So yeah, I feel like if I just wanted a comfortable cruiser, I could live with this car every day and be really happy. But yeah, many thanks to Harrison Auto Sales as always for hooking me up with this car to review for you guys today. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.